Hello, I'm Stephen Galpin and this is Property Matters. Welcome to the programme. Joining me today is developer, estate agent, investor, author and mentor to many young developers, John Howard. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Stephen. You make me sound very busy.
Well, I hope you are.
Very busy.
Good. Well, at least you've not been twiddling your thumbs for the last 4 months.
I've got something to tell you about that as well. So.
Okay, well, we'll wait with bated breath for that one. John, we talked a number of subjects in our last programme with you, and we do hope that that's a benefit to our viewers to get a focused view on what's happening. One of the most important things is the level of investment in property, and investment comes in various guises. Private investment, perhaps although you can't, strictly speaking, put residential property in a pension fund, nevertheless the investment is a pension.
It is a pension fund for a lot of people, yes.
So we have that factor. We have then developers such as yourself who may or may not retain some of their development for investment for their company. And of course, you know, the really normal buy-to-let market. And I really want to seek your views on how you think that may have changed since March.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of people who speak to me and say, I want to get on and buy a buy-to-let now. And I always say, well, why now? Why not wait till next year or even the year after? What is the rush? Because it's not the amount of deals you do, it's the quality of those deals. So if you just buy one property right, it's better than buying 3 that are no profit in them, in my view. But they all seem to say, I'm keeping it 20 years. I know it might go down a bit. They accept that. But over the years, I should be okay with it. And actually, you can't really argue with that. No. That's not a bad argument, to be fair to them. They're not at the hard-nosed end of the developer-investor market. They've probably got other jobs and they've got spare cash and they want to do something with it. And of course, the loan to ratio buy-to-lets may be coming down because we all know that banks aren't the bravest if there's a recession on the way or whatever. However, and that's the other thing that some of them are saying, well, look, I want to buy now just in case next year the loan to ratio is not as good. And again, you can't really argue about that. So I think if you're a buy-to-let investor and you're looking at over a long period of time, I would say pay that mortgage off as quick as you can, because it makes a huge difference. If you can pay it off in 15 years, not 20, you're saving thousands. Even if the interest rates are very low, you're still saving a load of money. And I think that, bear in mind that over the last 20 years, the market's gone up 5% a year across the board. Obviously, it's a micro market, like we said before, and that differs. So one area might have gone up more, one area might not have gone up at all. And actually, there's areas now that have not gone up very much since the last recession, have not come back to where they were pre-2008. Okay. So you've got to be careful.
And do you think people are taking into account the level of interest rates at the moment? I mean, they've never really been lower, have they?
Unbelievable. Who would have thought, you and I, 30 years ago, if we're having this conversation, if I said to you, Stephen, in 30 years' time, you'll still be good looking and active.
Well, I can still cross the road.
You can still cross the road, okay. And the interest rates would start at 0.1. You know, the bank rate 0.1%. You'd have called me a liar, and I would have agreed with you. It's unbelievable.
Well, I've said to you before, I can remember sitting in the developer's office listening to the rates go up by the minute, and I think they hit 15-odd%, didn't they?
We all paid it, I mean, it's just unbelievable. Now, of course, if you're a developer, it's not so good. You know, I can't borrow money, and we're only borrowing maximum 60% normally, and I can't borrow money on the whole for development finance at less than 5.5%. So, you know, these banks are making a lot of money out of it.
That's quite a margin, isn't it?
It's quite a margin. And I have got some borrowing at 3% on an overdraft, property overdraft basis, secured on property at 3% with the bank. But I mean, on the whole, you hear people paying 10, 12, 15% interest on development finance. I mean, goodness me, you've got to be very good, very good, Stephen, to make money if you're paying that sort of interest.
But are these people that perhaps wouldn't normally be able to borrow the money?
I think that's probably right. I mean, if you can borrow at 5.5%, why are you going to borrow at 10%?
But you see,
15?
if you're not competent and the people are charging you high interest rates because they have a question mark over your development ability and experience, then actually they're almost compounding the problem because they're almost driving you to an unsuccessful.
I agree entirely with you. And of course, if you are going to borrow bridging finance, which is really what it is. Make sure you know when you can pay that money back. Don't have it open-ended and say, well, I hope in a year I can pay it back, because if you go over the year, it won't just be 10 or 15%. They'll charge you even more. So, and they love that. On the whole, they like the idea of people not paying it. As long as there's enough equity, they like the idea, because these bridges can charge you even more. They're ruthless. They're ruthless.
I mean, I've got very mixed feelings about the buy-to-let market as an investment market now, because you've got on the one hand the government, who are going totally against the sort of ethos that Margaret Thatcher had, which was to create more private landlords to ease the housing crisis, which it still does to a great degree. Greatly. But so you've got the government bringing in sort of penal tax measures, discouraging the smaller landlord. Okay. On the other hand, then you've got rock bottom interest rates. You've then got a market which there's probably not a lot of up or down at the moment in whether you buy now or, as you say, wait for a year. Probably not a lot of difference, truthfully. So a lot of balancing factors there, aren't there? And how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, what I would say is the reason the government are encouraging people to put property into a limited company is so they can track it.
Yes.
So they can do annual returns, so that people are paying tax when they sell, because some people weren't paying tax on their second house when they sold it and things like that. And that's wrong, because you and I end up paying more tax, and we pay enough already. So I'm pleased the government have done that. I know it's difficult for some people. I've always had limited companies since the age of 18. So I've never exposed myself to owning anything personally apart from my home. That's in a trust, actually. So not even that. So it's different. But the one thing I will say, interest rates when you're borrowing it through a company on buy-to-let are not as good yet as buying it personally, borrowing the money personally. And I think that will change, because as more and more people buy through a company, those company loans, interest rates that buy-to-let companies offer will come down. They'll come down. I'm certain of that. Certain of that.
Right. I mean, we have this on other of our programs where people are forever asking, should I buy in a limited company or should I not? I mean, from a tax point of view, I mean, it makes sense, I think, for both sides, really. But of course, it's not without cost, is it?
No, and of course, if you're buying and selling a property, you may want to do it in your own name, because you get something like 12,000 tax-free, the first 12,000 profit, unearned income tax-free, which is a now they might bring that down in their budget.
Well, I think
that's something that I think they could bring down.
Where I was going next with you, John, is this: we've all enjoyed and probably made quite a bit of money over the years with the profit-free allowance on your own home.
Yes.
So providing you keep it for 12 months or 18 months and you're not seen to be trading, then it's tax-free. Yes. Do you think those days are over? Well,
a lot of builders, of course, have been doing this trick, and other types of developers for years. They buy a property, they refurbish it, they live in it for a few months, they sell it, they move on. And in the old days, you had to live in it 2 years. Now that's gone. There's no time limit. So if you get caught by the tax man, woman, because you are trading and you've been seen to trade 2 or 3, then you deserve to get caught, to be honest with you, in my view.
You do. I do just wonder, though, again, I'm coming back to my sort of London area here, you know, people quite often make 2, 3, 4, 500,000 pounds on a property.
They've made huge amounts of money, life-changing amounts of money.
Yeah, it's tax-free. Yes, it's good in a way. It takes you up the ladder. You tend to reinvest it and all the rest of it. But on the other hand, it's quite a privilege, isn't it?
Well, it's a huge privilege, and I think people in London, when people say to me, like, "Oh, I'm struggling to buy another house in London," and all the rest of it, I haven't got any sympathy for them, because they've had it good for so many years. Goodness me, the huge increases in value in London. You know, if you go up north, there's been very little increase in certain areas, not all areas, but London has seen massive growth.
So I'm just
Massive
looking.
growth.
I'm looking at a government here that's got to get money back.
I agree with you. They're going to have to do something
Because they're all saying at the moment how marvellous the Chancellor is. Well, let's
anybody
see.
can give money away.
Well, I was going to say that.
Even you and me will be popular if we gave money away.
So let's see how good he is getting it back.
Exactly. And there's going to be a sting in the tail. Clearly, there's got to be. And I think, unfortunately, it'll be the middle classes again, the people who work hard, who are aspirational, who end up paying most of the tax in this country. The super wealthy don't pay any. The ones with no money, sadly, don't pay any. The older people don't pay any. It's left to the middle classes, the aspirational business people that pay all the tax in the UK. And that is not right and not fair. And as a Tory government, of course, they're just the people that vote Tory. So you wouldn't have thought they want to clobber us again, but I bet you they're going to. I can't see how they can't.
I can't see how they can't.
No.
I mean, I don't know. Don't know what the answer is. And
who knows? Who'd have that job?
Who's got the crystal ball?
Exactly.
Okay, John, I think we'll go to our commercial break now. So join us after the break when we'll be talking about politics and planning consent. Hello and welcome back to Property Matters. I'm Stephen Galpin and with me is John Howard. Now, John, we've talked about various aspects of the market and I'm keen to talk about politics and planning consents and,
Right.
and how they're going to affect the
Yes.
market. But first of all, you have various interests. You've got a development underway. I believe you're launching a new property bond.
Listed bond.
Listed bond.
Yeah.
So you're a man of many interests in the property market. How is the politics affecting you at the moment?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, as you know, I'm chairman of. Well, I've just resigned actually as chairman of the local Conservatives, having got us in Ipswich, having got us
Single-handedly,
of course,
Yeah.
With the biggest majority ever in Ipswich.
Yes. Okay.
Tom Hunt, our MP, did a great job, worked very hard, and we all helped him. So I'm quite close to the political scene, and I've got a number of contacts and know a number of cabinet ministers. So I think they found it incredibly hard to get this COVID thing sorted out. And I think they've made some mistakes. Of course they have. I think they should be more honest about the mistakes they've made, because I think anyone would have made those mistakes. Massive pressure every day when you're live at 5 o'clock every night, and you've been asked those questions. It's very, very difficult. To get it right all the time. Going forward, I think Rishi, very bright boy, the Chancellor. I think he's done a great job. He's been too generous, in my view, on certain things. But he obviously realises, or they know, when the Chancellor says this could be like a recession like no other, then that was said partly for Boris's ears, I'm sure, to get things moving again, but also chancellors don't say that unless they know what's coming down the line. And unemployment, I can see it be going, we mentioned earlier, over 4 million. I can see that happening, and I can see the property market struggling on the back of it, and I'm sure they can too.
But John, I look at our housing minister, I think, if I'm right, it's the 12th one in less than 10 years. And I listened to some of the ideas that were put forward just before lockdown, which was legislating to put fruit trees in the back garden of all new houses.
Are you talking about Robert Jenrick?
I am
Robert,
indeed, yes.
Okay, yeah. But he's the homes community and housing and God knows what else. There is a housing minister as well.
There is.
He's the MP for Tamworth, but I can't remember his name. Anyway.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what putting fruit trees in the back gardens of starter homes is really going to do, and how much that's going to excite the market and set the market on fire.
I think the problem is that they're under huge pressure to build 500,000 new homes a year. They're at 240,000 at the moment. They've promised to get up to 300. I was part of a think tank a while ago at the Institute of Economics that we've gone back to the housing minister regarding ideas to try and break through the 300,000 barrier. But it's very hard, Stephen, very hard.
John, let me come back. Look, so
do I sound defensive?
Yeah. So You come up with silly ideas like put this fruit tree in the back.
I didn't come up with that idea.
Well, he did. So
Yeah.
I was just wondering
Someone would have done, not him, but
whether he
someone
got
would
it
have
from
done.
your think tank or not. But,
I don't think so.
And then, you know, in the letting market is, we're going to legislate. So every letting, it'll be fine for them to have pets in the flats. We're going to legislate.
That's great news. Not.
Well, I mean, I've been a magistrate for 16, 17 years, and I wouldn't like to be on the bench or the district judge that has to decide whether the government's directive to let you have pets in the building overrides the landlord's lease.
Yeah. It's all very messy, and
I mean,
I don't think they've thought some of these things through.
But why
enough.
on earth are they getting involved in this sort of thing?
I think they're under. I think society is changing. I think that more people are renting, and I think that they're looking at long-term short-hold tenancies where you can't get people out.
But John,
because of their families and because of schools.
That was the cause of the housing catastrophe in the 80s.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Landlords wouldn't let their properties because they couldn't get people out.
But what you must remember, people like Robert Jenerick were in short trousers in the 80s, 90s. When he born, I think he's 38 years old or 39. So, you know, these people, they're very, very bright. They're super bright, but they're not streetwise. And they have these young, bright people come up with all these ideas, and then they try and put them into force. Some might work, some won't work. I agree with you. 11 housing ministers in 10 years is absolutely crazy.
Well, I think it's simpler than that. I don't think they even think whether it'll work or not. They think whether it'll grab the headlines or fit the spin.
I think there's a bit of that. But more importantly is this commercial and this PD. The PD they've done, I think, on the whole has worked quite well. Permissive developments work quite well. They've now increased that from the 1st of August, where you can build another 2 stories. Now, the hype on it all is great, but my planning consultant sent me a long list the other day of things that you can't do. And let me assure you, Stephen, it ain't very easy to do what they're suggesting. You need to get all sorts of different permissions. It's not like the office to residential PD, which is pretty simple. These extra bolt-ons are difficult to get. And I know that they've announced again also in September about shops to residential. Again, it's not as simple as it sounds. It really isn't as simple as it sounds. So please, people need to be careful.
Well, they do. And this is what I want to come to next, because you see, here we are, changing planning consent, and it grabs the headlines. And this is all about building numbers.
Yes.
And I have this fear that Jenrick's ambitions, or the Conservative Party's ambitions in terms of 300,000 or whatever.
It needs to be 500.
Well, is a little bit like Mr. Hancock's estimates of the testing that goes on.
I think you're being a bit hard to Matt, to be fair. He's a nice guy. And,
well, he might be a nice guy.
He lives quite near us, actually.
But
he's all right. He's had a very tough job.
I do seem to be reading in the papers mistake after mistake.
Well,
but anyway.
He's got a very tough job.
Okay. Well, he obviously knows a lot more than Apple at the moment, doesn't he? So, but anyway,
perhaps what's one of the
let's get back on piste here. Look, so good spin. Yeah, we'll get some extra housing out of the high street, out of these empty shops. But you know, we've been consistently doing programs here for the last 2 years, interviewing some very, very senior and experienced planning people. Yes. Talking about the demise of the high street, and the amount of work that has gone into that is amazing.
It is.
And some of the strategies that councils are trying to adopt are terrific. You know, they're trying to get the mix of the shops right. And you know, I remember talking to a guy who did a lot of the original letting here at Canary Wharf. And I said, do you know what? You've been so successful here in filling the whole of the malls with good shops and shops that work. I said, what did you see that a lot of the big institutional investors that own parts of the high street saw differently? And he said, well, do you know what? He said, I just took the demographics of Canary Wharf and I just did a process of, instead of trying to chase the highest rent for the longest period of time, I just tried to suit the shops to the demographic.
Yeah, but
and it works.
Yeah, I can understand that. And when you've got a fresh bit of paper, when you've got a clean bit of paper to start with, nothing on it, you can do that. One thing I would say is most of these local authorities have been in denial about the high street for years and years and years. Yes. And what's happened now, in 4 months, we've gone forward 10 years. All the retail shops that were in trouble anyway in the long term are going to go. And anyone who thinks they're not affected, if they've got a pension, they're affected because their pension company will have invested in prime office probably and prime retail. And all that's going to change. And these towns are going to become almost inner city villages with some shops. And that'll be fine. But everyone else will be out of town. The shops will be out of town.
So do you think we're going back to big out-of-town shopping centres again?
I think the only places people are going to shop are the smart shopping malls and out of town. Why would you want to go into a city centre? I've got a friend of mine who's got 150 car parks. His turnover went down 95%.
Yeah, right.
I mentioned that. It made me feel better. But yes, it's changing in front of our very eyes now. It's changing. And these local authorities finally have got to take their head out of the sand, look up and actually do something about it. And one of the reasons they didn't want to do anything about it was because of rates. And going forward, the rates will be scrapped as they are, I think, and hopefully it will worked out on the VAT, so it'll be worked out on turnover for these commercial premises, because they cannot keep paying the silly rates. I know it's suspended for a year, but the rate situation in this country is crazy. It's outdated by about 20 years and it's got to change. And actually, what a great opportunity with Brexit coming up and with COVID, what a great opportunity to change the tax systems in this country for once and for all and get them simplified.
I think that's a very good idea, a very sensible idea. But I come back to this point. Do we really think that the housing minister and his department are the right people to start making these decisions, which they then feed down to councils, sometimes in an appropriate manner, sometimes totally inappropriately? It's
very frustrating for ministers because they can do everything they're doing. It gets down to local authority, it gets down to planning, the planners resist. And the local people in that area where these properties are going to be developed resist. And really, we looked at taking the parish councils and the local authority out of some of these planning. And obviously, if it's a very big scheme, they're already taken out of it, really. Well, it's called in by the Secretary of State for housing. But I think that needs to be done at a much more smaller level.
Development is so sophisticated these days and has so many facets to it. I do wonder whether 10 or 11 lay council members are the right people to
Most of them are clueless. They don't know what's going on. And if you go to these meetings, they focus on one small item when actually there's so many bigger things they should be looking at within that application. And it's normally about themselves and about what's in that local area and why is that going to affect and so on. And they need to take the bigger picture and they need to be much more open-minded about housing in the UK.
Okay, John Howard, thank you so much for
pleasure.
Sharing your experience with us.
Thank you.
I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time and don't forget, property matters.